Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on Doordarshan, India's national broadcaster, about India's foreign policy, India's international relations, and India's promotion of global public good. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking up important initiative of the Government of India, which is the Global Buddhist Summit, an attempt to bring together Buddhist scholars and thinkers and practitioners from around the world under one unified umbrella. This is an important soft power diplomacy exercise of the Government of India, and also has ramifications for India's rise as a civilizational superpower. We're going to be talking about this with a very special guest. Let me introduce you to him. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Anirban Ganguly. Dr. Ganguly is a noted intellectual. He is a director of the Syama Prasad Mookerjee Research Foundation and senior member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and the author of a very intriguing book, and I hope he will talk about it, Swami Vivekananda and Buddhism and the mystic link of this. Dr. Ganguly, such an honor to have you in the studio.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Dr. Ganguly, India is hosting the Global Buddhist Summit. We have more than 170 participants from around the world, 30 countries. The Buddhist community, both leaders as well as scholars and thinkers have gathered, and this is a momentous occasion. It's the first time ever such a large global gathering of Buddhist scholars and practitioners has happened. So the first question that comes to anyone's mind is, why is it happening in India? And why is India hosting this and not any other country? And this is something that we should explain to the audiences, because people do not often associate Buddhism with India in a very deep way, but there is a deep connection, and we are trying to now bring those out. So your thoughts on India and Buddhism and the link between the two?
I think it's most natural that India is hosting this conference under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, because India is the land of Buddha. India is Buddha's land, and very interestingly, a very senior monk who's himself present in this conference, who has a large international following, he said something very interesting. He said, Buddha is India's local boy who has gone global. So I think that sums up the significance, the symbolism of why India is hosting the International Buddhist Summit in such a large scale. It has never happened before. And we should also keep in mind, when we are joining the dots, that I think no Prime Minister since independence has done so much for reinstating, for rekindling, for disseminating Buddha's legacy, his message, not only in India, in globally, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has done.
Absolutely.
And he's not, it's not something that he's been doing after he has become Prime Minister. I mean, if you, very significantly, he says that I feel always, and he has said this, he's on record publicly having said this not once, a number of times, that I feel a special connection to Buddha, to Lord Buddha. I feel a special connection to his message of compassion, to his message of harmony, and he has said this. And I would like to remind, through you, I would like to remind our viewers that as Chief Minister of Gujarat, Prime Minister Narendra Modi as Chief Minister of Gujarat had hosted one of the largest Buddhist conference, international conferences. 20 countries had come and had sent their representatives. Not only that, if you recall, he is repeatedly focused on his birthplace, which is Vadnagar.
Yes.
Vadnagar's deep civilizational connect with Buddhism. And he made a very interesting point. He says that, the impression is that Buddha went east, but Vadnagar is in the west.
Correct.
And Huinsang is on record having said that it had one of the largest Buddhist hostels there, students studying there. In the sense, Vadnagar, that entire region was a region of knowledge, of Buddhist studies in history. As Chief Minister, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ordered excavations there. Buddha's relics were discovered. The relics are there in the MS University. As Chief Minister, he convened this conference. As Chief Minister, he In fact, he recalled in one of his speeches, he said that, when the new secretariat was being built, he erected a huge Buddha statue there.
Right.
Even at the chief minister's residence, he erected a Buddha statue. So I think, as chief minister, what he did in terms of this Buddhist link, civilizational connect, he has amplified that 100 folds as Prime Minister. I think that is very significant when we ask this basic question, why is India hosting it? India is the land of
the current leadership, the priority on promoting Buddhism is evident. But if you go back in time, of course, it's the birthplace of Buddhism and we are so proud of it. But there is also the spread worldwide, especially across Asia, through our emperors like Ashoka and Kanishka and all of them, and in a way, when I look at Prime Minister Modi today and you see the analogy of history, Buddhism was preserved and flourished under the patronage of great rulers, and it seems like in a way finally we are reviving that tradition that the state with all its resources is really committed to this philosophy and its wisdom, no?
Absolutely. I think Buddhist teachers and Buddhist thinkers as well as monks, all of them are united in this perception that Prime Minister Modi has done for Buddhism globally what very few leaders or no other leader has done in recent times. So I think that analogy is very symbolic and important when you draw that historical analogy. And you mentioned Dr. Syama Prasad Mookerjee. I would like to bring in a point here,
sure,
which I think has been in the past, Dr. Mookerjee's legacy has been obviously deliberately marginalized. Besides being, founder of the Bharatiya Janasangh, besides being the first industry minister, he was one of the most active presidents of the Mahabodhi Society of India. And he was president for a decade. So, what Prime Minister Modi is doing today, I see that echo, I see that reflection of the past. When in a very limited circumstances, under trying circumstances, under a lot of challenging situation, Dr. Syama Prasad Mookerjee, as president of Mahabodhi Society, took Buddha's message post-independence across the world. I mean, he went to Southeast Asia. The relics of Mahamogalan and Sariputta, Buddha's chief disciples, a portion of those relics are kept at the Kabai Pagoda in Myanmar. And we installed a plaque commemorating that. And it was due to Dr. Mookerjee's effort that the government of India gave as permanent loan portions of those relics. He went to Cambodia, he went to Vietnam. So it is fascinating right after independence, the manner in which he spearheaded India's civilizational message. And Prime Minister Modi says, I mean, if you look at his itinerary, if one studies Prime Minister's Buddhist itinerary, you will see he has gone from Kandy to Kyoto.
Yeah, the Lotus Trail as it's called. Yeah.
From Hanoi to Hambantota. I think this Prime Minister has gone around.
Absolutely. And the legacy of Dr. Syama Prasad Mookerjee is very important. In a way, the government of India today is doing on a larger scale what he had initiated. And that's an important point made by Dr. Ganguly. Viewers, let's hear from none other than Prime Minister Modi himself when he was addressing the Global Buddhist Summit about what India has taken from the teachings of the Buddha and how India is concretely applying it in its policies and in its approach to the world. Let's hear Prime Minister Modi and then return to the discussion.
दुनिया के अलग-अलग देशों में पीस मिशंस हो या तुर्की के भूकंप जैसी आपदा हो, भारत अपना पूरा सामर्थ्य लगाकर हर संकट के समय मानवता के साथ खड़ा होता है, मम भाव से खड़ा होता है। आज भारत के 140 करोड़ लोगों की इस भावना को दुनिया देख रही है, समझ रही है और स्वीकार भी कर रही है। और मैं मानता हूं इंटरनेशनल बुद्धिस्ट कॉन्फेडरेशन का ये मंच इस भावना को नया विस्तार दे रहा है। ये हम सभी लाइक माइंडेड एंड लाइक हार्टेड देशों को एक परिवार के रूप में बुद्ध धम्म और शांति के विस्तार के नए अवसर देगा। वर्तमान चुनौतियों को हम किस तरह से हैंडल करते हैं, इस पर चर्चा अपने आप में न केवल प्रासंगिक है, बल्कि विश्व के लिए इसमें उम्मीद की किरण भी समाहित है। हमें याद रखना है कि समस्याओं से समाधान की यात्रा ही बुद्ध की यात्रा है।
So viewers, Prime Minister of India is saying that India is following the path led by the great enlightened soul, the Buddha, and also that the quest for solutions to problems is the essence of Buddhist philosophy, and we should apply it to contemporary requirements of the world. Dr. Ganguly, Prime Minister was clearly elucidating in a very profound way how Buddhist thought and values are imbued in the way we look at the world, and there's absolutely no contradiction between Hinduism and Buddhism in that sense, because we have all coexisted for millennia and grown together. So here, if you look at Asia in particular, all our neighboring countries, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, even Northeast Asia, up to Korea, China, Japan, India spread this great wisdom, ancient wisdom, to all these places, and when we are bringing them all together here under the Global Buddhist Summit, it seems like finally we have realized our own core identity as a nation, and that we are not confused anymore. And I think that's one more reason why you are saying all these Buddhist luminaries are appreciating and praising India as the protector of Buddhism today. And in that sense, your thoughts on what the PM is doing and how it is being seen from outside. Within the country, of course, we are quite convinced that this is the right thing to do, but from outside, this is a new India that is in many ways what should have been India, but had maybe lost its path or lost its vision for a long time. But finally, we seem to be returning to that path, and that's a big re-emergence of India as a leader of global Buddhism, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think India is emerging as what I have termed as a civilizational state. A civilizational state is that entity which bases its modern outreach on the core fundamentals of its civilizational past. So the Buddhist dimension, the Buddha dimension in India's civilizational march is a very fundamental dimension. And that's why you see very interestingly Prime Minister says Vikas and Virasat. So you are not forsaking one for the other. There's a balance, there's a synergy. Our developmental march, our march towards greater civilizational sense is based on a balance of Vikas and Virasat. And so we are reawakening to our Buddhist Virasat. And that Virasat has always been globally recognized, that India is the heir, is the claimant in that sense, in a positive sense, of Buddha's message. And Indian diplomacy, you mentioned about India's outreach, it's very clear, and when Prime Minister himself says this, he mentioned the example of Turkey.
Yes.
If you see in the last decade, every outreach, every crisis outreach that we have done, whether it is Nepal earthquake or whether it is distribution of the vaccines, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the only Prime Minister who, when COVID was declared, personally called up 50 heads of state of countries which were vulnerable and assured them that India is standing beside you, we are there with you, you need not worry. This is the compassion.
Yes.
This is compassion in Indian diplomacy. And I think that there are no strings attached when we give aid, when India aids. There are no strings attached when India stands by a country, a people in times of crisis. Especially that has been evident in the last decade. So that compassion-driven diplomacy,
yes,
that compassion-driven succor, solace,
absolutely,
which is the hallmark of Prime Minister's international diplomacy, is driven, as he himself has states, is driven by Buddha's message.
Very much, very much. And Dr. Ganguly, in terms of concrete initiatives and new efforts also, I mean, from reinvigorating the Buddhist circuit.
Absolutely.
For the pilgrims from around,
Yes.
especially from Asia,
Yes.
to come to India and
Yes.
to connect with
Yes.
Sri Lanka and Nepal
Yes.
and Bhutan. All these things, the connectivity, we have really imagined now how to bring all of them together and join the nodes, because Buddhism has so many variants and regional, you know, forms of manifestation, but they are all converging in a way in India, you know, which is the fountainhead or the origin of all this. And even our diplomatic missions, our embassies, our high commissions, they have been, you know, more active lately to draw the links, to bring more Buddhists to India from their countries, respective countries, and also promoting scholarship, study of Pali language and Sanskrit, and how the two are interlinked. Relics, you mentioned the relics also. We have now made it a practice to send our relics for exhibition to in other Buddhist countries.
Yes. In Mongolia.
In Mongolia,
it was
you've
there
written
for a
about
month.
it.
It went around.
Yeah.
In Mongolia.
So these things add up, right? I mean, now we even have a luxury train across India,
Yes.
connecting all the important sites like Sarnath, you know, Shravasti, and Gaya and all these places. So that sense, we are doing a lot of concrete things, right, in terms of policies also. So it's not just at the level of metaphysical, you know, discourse or spiritual exchange, that is there, but also to facilitate these, you know, linkages and to make them real and tangible. We are doing a lot right now, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, I'll give you, Sreeram, you very rightly said this. It's happening at two levels. One is the visible, implemented, physical aspect of connecting the Buddha legacy and heritage. So you have the Kushinagar International Airport, which was inaugurated by Prime Minister. It has facilitated in a big way international connectivity. 360 crore rupees has been allotted for the Buddhist circuit, to develop the Buddha circuit all across the country, and it's being done at a war footing. Then very interestingly, the highways and connectivity is being enhanced between centers of Buddhism historically. On the other hand, at the ideational level, it is Prime Minister who has actually taken the message of Buddha and, you know, next generation message. He has linked it to the mission life. That if you are talking about sustainability, you are talking about climate change, mitigating climate change, if you are talking about lifestyle crisis and challenge, you have to go to Buddha. You have to take indications, directions, signposts from his message. So he has linked, and he says that today climate change can only be addressed, can only be mitigated, lifestyle challenges can only be addressed if one is immersed and one takes cues from Buddha's message. So mission life,
Absolutely.
lifestyle for environment, I think that has been integrally connected with compassion towards yourself, towards your surrounding, towards your fellow beings, and that it starts. And Prime Minister said, yes, you know, in the IBC conference, he said, mitigation of climate change starts with yourself, with the individual.
Which is a very core Buddhist idea.
The other, if you recall, in 2015, he started Samvad.
Yes.
The Vivekananda International Foundation and Tokyo Foundation. Between the two foundations, it was initiative of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Yes.
And it was conflict avoidance and environmental, philosophy.
Yes.
And this Samvad was held. Prime Minister launched it in Delhi. It went to Tokyo. It went to Mongolia. I think Prime Minister is the only Indian Prime Minister to have visited Gandhan Monastery in Mongolia.
In Mongolia, that's right.
I think after Kushak Bakula Rinpoche, no one else has done this much to revivify and relink India and Mongolia. And Mongolia is so crucial, not only strategically, but it's so crucial to the Buddha narrative for us.
Yes, so and they're all there at the Global Buddhist Summit. They've all come. The Mongolians have appreciated, the Japanese have appreciated, so many others are appreciating India's lead role in reviving the Buddhist linkages and circuit. Viewers, I have a video statement from Professor Sunaina Singh, who is the Vice Chancellor of Nalanda University, about the contemporary relevance of Buddhism, which we've just been discussing with Dr. Ganguly also, and in environment, in peace and conflict resolution, all these areas. And let's hear, and by the way, Nalanda University is one of the great ancient Indian Buddhist universities that was destroyed by invaders, but the fact is now we have revived it and it's functioning, it's been rebuilt in that sense. So let's hear from Professor Sunaina Singh and continue the discussion.
The world over, we have been reeling under the COVID-19 pandemic, the wars that have been disturbing the peace of the world, where environmental crisis is concerned. I think all these should find some solutions in India. I firmly believe that India has always been a solution center for the world, given our spiritual ethos and peace and harmony as the foundations of Indian knowledge systems, Indian philosophy. Buddhism has played a very significant role in spreading peace and harmony across Southeast Asia. We have been the torch bearers of soft power diplomacy all through the world. Even today, dealing with the geopolitical level, the world over looks at our Honorable Prime Minister to provide solutions, looks at India to come up or to stand or as a nation that needs to be emulated. I think peace and harmony has been part of Buddhist philosophy, the Indian ethos, Indian knowledge tradition, which believes in elevating mankind. And today we need to elevate ourselves in order to be there for the next generations and create a new world ethos of peace and harmony.
So viewers, you heard from the Vice Chancellor of Nalanda University that India is the solution center to the world, Dr. Ganguly, and that is very much the intention of reviving the Buddhist linkages, isn't it? Because by harnessing this ancient wisdom and bringing major thought leaders together, the idea is that we should be able to come up with solutions. And the Prime Minister also has been talking about the wars that are raging, climate change, terrorism, migration, refugees. You've got a lot of big global problems, and it seems like all the materialistic approaches to solving them have yielded only minimal results so far, and we are failing collectively as humanity. But that's why I think we have to go back to the Bodhisattva probably, and many other such spiritual leaders to come up with something new and something different, which is in a way changing the dynamic, because the old thinking has not helped. And I think that is when we say India is a Vishwaguru or a provider of solutions, we are very much embedded in that notion of bringing back the golden era of the past and using it to solve the wretched current status of the world.
Absolutely. I think in Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke of it in the United Nations. He reiterated it at the International Buddhist Summit, that India has given the world not Yuddha but Buddha. I think that encapsulates the fundamental approach that India has taken today, and that approach is very practical, because today, as you rightly said, and Prime Minister himself has reiterated, that the world is facing a crisis of war, crisis of climate, and a sense of security that countries and people have lost. All of it, in a very practical manner, can be rediscovered in the message of Buddha, in the manner in which India is disseminating it across the world. I think that, therefore, whether you look at lifestyle, whether you look at nutrition, whether you look at climate, whether you look at conflict mitigation and conflict avoidance, all of it is there in India's civilizational ethos and experience. And a very fundamental, cardinal part of that ethos and that experience is the Buddha experience, is the Buddha ethos. And I think that is what Prime Minister is, in a very systematic, in a very pragmatic way, telling the world. And therefore, when I think we need to focus on one particular aspect of his articulation, and he's not done it 2 days ago. He's been doing it for consistently, and that is, he speaks of the Asian century.
Yes.
And he says the Asian century, India will obviously have an important role in shaping the Asian century. But he gives a very interesting caveat or interesting rider in it. He says the Asian century cannot be possible without Buddha. It is Buddha's message, his vision, his philosophy, which will shape and which will drive the Asian century. So I see a lot of connections here. When he's talking about Amrit Kal and the rise of India, this Amrit Kal will see the rise, the preparation of the Asian century.
Yes, and he is also, Dr. Ganguly, talking about like-minded and like-hearted countries and how they can all become part of one family. And that is, I think, a grander vision. It goes beyond military or economic cooperation.
Absolutely.
Of course, those are necessary. Strategic partnerships are necessary for India. But over and above that, to make it a really thick strategic relationship, you need something like Buddhism. And I think in that sense, it's also practically very beneficial. So viewers, you've heard how from the great heights of Buddhist wisdom to concrete implementation of those values on the ground, India is taking the lead. I want to thank Dr. Anirban Ganguly for sharing wonderful insights, deep insights. We have to still discuss how Buddhism and Hinduism are linked at a mystic level on another day, but that's all we have for you this time, viewers. Do think about cultural diplomacy, how important it is, the central place of Buddhism, and why India has emerged as a leader in promoting global Buddhism, and how that's being appreciated by countries, especially across Asia, and what this does to India's standing and stature in the community of nations. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.